Games Workshop has recently completed a project of epic proportions. 9 years ago, the first Primarch model was released, and now with the recently revealed Con, every single one of them has been translated into resin. And I am going to review them all. Hey guys, Jay here, welcome to EonsOfBattle, and today I would like to talk about the Primarchs. I'm a big fan of Space Marines in general, which should be pretty obvious by the 10,000 points of Black Templar Space Marines behind me, but it was the lore that sold me on the Space Marines. The Horus Heresy, which is a series of 50 books that I have not read a single word of, is considered by many to be the gold standard of Warhammer novels, and is all about the Primarchs and their legions. I wonder why some people think that 40k is a Space Marine show guest starring 22 other factions. I own the first couple Horus Heresy books, and I'll get around to it one day. But now, let's get into what are the Primarchs. The Primarchs were the 20 genetically engineered sons of the Emperor of Man. The Emperor used his own DNA in their creation, and they were designed to be gods among men. Immortal giants with superhuman physiques and intelligence, towering above Space Marines as they do over mortal men. They were also incredibly charismatic, as their main role was to be generals and leaders of the Imperial military. They are basically demigods with daddy issues. Half of them are the best hope there is for humanity, and the other half are trying to actively tear it down. So now it's time to hop on over to Forge World and take a look. I have seen these models out of my periphery forever, but I've never really stopped to examine them in detail. Some of them I know very well from lore videos, but some of them are gonna be very new. It's time to take a look. Also, does anyone else have to take a captcha test every single time they go on Forge World? I don't know how many times I've clicked on photos with buses in them. Number 1, the Dark Angels, Lionel Johnson. I think this is one of the newer models that they've released, and I think he's really, really good. But there are some things that I don't know if I like about it. He feels a little bit lopsided on his base because he is kind of standing off center, and then I feel like his opponents, this little blob of Space Marines, are kind of more center stage than he is. And I also don't kind of love his pose. Like, he looks a little bit, it's not really fair, but he looks a little bit like a 5-year-old with the wiffle bat who's choking up to swing on the little plastic ball on the stick. I mean, just, imagine, a 5-year-old in your head just going, whoosh, and then that is kind of his pose. It's not the most cool pose of all time. One thing that's kind of fun about the Primarchs in general is that they're supposed to be unbelievably tall, like to the point where it's almost comical. And so it's weird that you've got this really, really, really tall guy about to swing at this little 5-year-old child. It would almost be more impressive if somehow the Space Marine was on equal height as him, but then it wouldn't be a very good statue of the Primarch. And I know that this is just his scenic base, and you can take him off, and I believe that he's probably standing on a 40 or 50 millimeter base, and you can remove him from this diorama of him taking out some Night Lord Space Marines, but I don't know, it's just kind of all right. I mean, he's very well sculpted. I really, really like his armor. I think it is neat. It's classic Space Marine armor, but it's very ornate and well detailed, and there has been some shaping to it to make it look not quite exactly like a standard Tactical Marines armor. But I think for me, he's just kind of all right. I don't really love the pose. I feel like the armor is nice, but it's not doing much to make him like the Lion. He just kind of feels like a very special Space Marine. And I think this is gonna become a common trend, but a lot of the dioramas that really make use of a bunch of dead Space Marines are not my favorite. Because it kind of, unless you do it very, very well, it kind of just looks like a pile of action figures sitting on the carpet. Like, because Space Marines have some absolute girth to them. Usually, like in a video game, like when there's casualties on the field, usually the casualties are like halfway sunken into the ground. And that does a really good job of letting you see that they're there without taking up a lot of clutter on the screen. Whereas these guys, I mean, that Space Marine, he's half as tall dead on the ground as he is standing up. They're pretty obnoxious. So I feel like I'm just not that big a fan of the dead Space Marines. And also, just in my own ability to imagine, I can kind of fill in a lot of blanks. I don't need to see dead Space Marines to know that he's a super badass who could take out a field of pleb Space Marines. But anyway, I like the Lion, he's pretty good. Moving on to number 2, Unknown. Nobody knows any information on the second Primarch, it is lost. And so I guess we'll move on, and I'll just say that I can't wait to meet her. Number 3, the Emperor's Children, Bullgram. And this guy feels really, really cool. I love his pose, I love his sword, I love all of his little dangly tassels. I think he's in Terminator armor because he doesn't have a power plant, but I really, really like that his armor is fitted. It looks almost more like a Stormcast armor than a Space Marine armor, and I love that. I like that in my opinion, with these miniatures, I really think that they can crack the mold and move away from some of the design features that are typical with 40K. Like, I feel like they can even move away from heroic scale, where they kind of inflate the size of hands and inflate the size of heads and weapons, because these are meant to be display pieces. They're meant to be a little bit more like realistic and actually represents the things that they are talking about in the novels. And I really, really like this guy's armor. It feels kind of more like real armor, as opposed to the ultra chunky Buzz Lightyear Space Marine armor, which I really like in the silly world of 40K. But I feel like if I'm plopping down some real money for a statue of a Primarch, I want something really, really special. And I feel like this does a really, really good job of fulfilling that, because it does look like kind of the classic idea of 40K is like Knights of Ye Old Round Table in space. So this does look to me like classic Knights in Shining armor, but made into power armor and looking really, really badass. I really love this model. I think he's great. Don't know nothing about Fulgrim, but I think he's got a really, really cool model. And I'm sure it wasn't planned because this predates Rick Sanchez, but his face looks a lot like Rick from Rick and Morty, and I kind of love it. I think if I had this miniature, I'd be really tempted to add his little green dribble that he always has on his face, just for the lulz. But I really like this model, it's super cool. And again, I feel like this does maybe a little bit better job of just implying him taking out some Space Marines, because we got one laying face down in the dirt, and then like a couple more just hands like sticking out of the ground. Love it, very well done. And he actually has a holster that could hold a bolt pistol. Classically in 40K, Space Marines wear las pistol holsters, basically because in Rogue Trader, they were las pistol holsters, because Space Marines would carry las pistols, and because las pistols actually look like a normal gun that would fit in a normal holster that instantly can be identified as a holster. Even on modern Primaris models, with their big old bolt pistols, they apparently put them in regular las pistol holsters just because it looks like a holster. But yeah, this model is awesome. I absolutely love it. And his sword is dope. Moving on to number 4, the Iron Warriors, Perturabo. Yeah, it's gonna be a lot of the same of I know nothing about Perturabo, but this model I actually really, really, really like. I love that he's in Terminator plate, and like a lot of them are in Terminator plate, but his feels like his might have been like the original Terminator plate. It feels very industrial, it feels very mechanical, and it actually feels like it makes sense. Like, he probably needs Terminator plate to swing around that giant hammer and to have those gauntlet pistol machine gun things. I really, really dig it. I think often, like especially on Grey Knight miniatures, their arm guns are hilariously giant on a little Space Marine wrist. It looks a little bit ridiculous, and it sort of works when you have the entire ensemble of like their double falchions or their long spear or whatever. But this guy, I feel like it's pretty darn well balanced. I could see this guy being the bad guy in an Iron Man movie. Maybe Iron Man 4 is gonna star Perturabo. But I also like that the bullets are leading up through a chain, because he's not carrying bullets on his arm because he'd run out of bullets in like a second. The Grey Knights, they do have a little magazine on their arm to make their gun even more obnoxiously huge. And I mean, how many rounds of ammunition could that possibly be? They're gonna be like, brr, and then they're gonna be out of ammunition. But of course they're not, or maybe they carry more ammo somewhere on their belt, and then they have to reload their arm. I like that this guy has bullet chains. I think it makes sense, and it makes me think that somebody was actually like really thinking about what this guy would need to be efficient in battle and what his style of combat would be like. And I like that his Terminator armor is helping him carry all this junk. He's got two little kind of robot sighty things that are helping him look around. I like that his head is covered in cables and it looks really kind of creepy. One thing that I feel like kind of doesn't get into 40K as much as maybe it should is if you look at some of the really, really beautiful black and white, like charcoal and pencil and ink artwork, is they usually fill up every single space with patches of machinery and cogs. And I understand why that stuff kind of usually probably gets left behind because it's just a pain in the butt to make and then it's a pain in the butt to paint. But I really, really like that feature coming back on his face. It really kind of makes him look macabre and a little bit sad that he probably can't come out of that armor unless he's got so many little, USB ports and, lightning cables to detach from his head. It's probably a giant pain in the butt. But I really dig it. And what's fun about this guy is he's not standing on a bunch of slate rock with Space Marines, but he's standing on a big piece of Imperial Knight that's broken. And I like to think that he probably took that hammer and he just took out the legs and the whole thing came crumbling down, and then he climbed on top just to get a little bit of a better vantage point to shoot down some more cults, some more plebs. So super, super like that. Moving on to number 5, the White Scars Jagatai Khan, the newest of the Primarchs. And once again, I think that they're maybe leaning maybe a smidge too heavily on classic Space Marine armor, but it's okay. It works pretty well for him. My eye is instantly drawn to his big old sword, which is really nice and simple. And actually, this miniature has some really, really good posing. I like that he's standing on an actual thing instead of just some rubble. And I feel like the arcing up towards center of his sword and then the edge of his cloak arcing down into the center kind of creates a really nice yin-yang. I think they tried really, really hard on framing for this guy. It really looks nice. With all of these, it's really hard not to judge the paint job because I'm judging the paint job, but I feel like maybe another painter could really do something to make him feel a little less busy. I mean, he's covered in gold, he's covered in tassels, he's covered in little bits and bobs, and I feel like it's all kind of taking away from the whole picture of him. And it also doesn't help that he's painted in kind of a pretty literal style where his armor is white, so it's painted white. The gold on him is gold, so it's painted gold. And I mean, that makes sense, clearly, but I think it'd be cool, since he's more of a display piece, to maybe get a little bit more artistic and expressionistic with it. Maybe have his sword casting light onto his top half to make that really, really bright, while the bottom half is a little bit more in shadow. It'd be really cool to see things like that, but I understand that this is also painted to display on a website to get people to buy it, and so they don't want any details to not be exaggerated, because really, when you do really cool artistic expressions like that, some people are going to connect with it and be like, that is the coolest thing I've ever seen and I totally connect with it, and other people are gonna be like, why is it so blue? So, I totally understand their painting style. It works very, very well for what they're trying to do, and it looks good. And I really, really like that his head looks exactly like Mini Wargamer Dave from miniwargaming.com. He looks just like him. I'm sure he'll be picking up this model soon. Super cool. I really like his sword. I like when they do something different with the power swords. And it's not very medieval. It's very cool. And I like his red gloves. They're just kind of nice. Just a fun little detail. Moving on to number 6, Space Wolves Leviathanrus. And this model is very, very, very nice, but let me complain about it for a while. So, for me, I don't really love action poses for these guys. I feel like Primarchs are incredibly badass, but they're also leaders. They're probably not doing as much combat as you'd think. I mean, literally, these wars are happening across multiple planets at the same time. And how much leading is he really doing actively engaged in conflict? And I think another problem for me is that they're not all actively fighting, and they're not all actively like standing proudly or resting. I mean, I'm not saying that they should be at computer terminals hitting buttons to direct orders, but I don't know, when they are actively throwing a punch or swinging a sword and putting their all into it, it just doesn't feel as important. Like, you know, whenever there was a Greek statue of the gods, they're always standing very proudly and, you know, looking up to heaven or looking down upon the plebs. You never really see, you know, a statue of a guy running. You know, that guy would not be Zeus, or they would not have their big gods or demigods displayed like that. And so I mean, this is brilliantly done. He looks like a big, heavy guy running. He looks great. The proportions are all right about there. The armor looks great. I like that his foot is actually like kind of turned in a little bit, like he's really pushing against the ground so that he can get a little bit more oomph. It's really, really well done. But for me, I don't like a running pose. That's just me. I also think his weapons are like 50% too fancy. I don't really like a big fancy weapon. I mean, look at that sword. It's got like spikes on the side of it, but is he meant to hold his other hand above the spikes and then use the last little bit of sword? I feel like just a little bit more of a plain sword, because the Leviathanrus is the Emperor's executioner. Like, his whole thing was he killed the big bads. I just feel like a more plain, simple, brutal sword would get that point across more than a really, really ornate kind of World of Warcraft limited edition, you know, sword. It doesn't jimmy my jams, it doesn't flim my flams. And I feel a little bit the same way about his axe. It's a little bit too ornate. But overall, I mean, this model is gorgeous. The face is really, really good. I like the hair blowing in the wind. This one is one of the better paint jobs. I really feel like they did something special with this, because the Space Wolves wore gray armor, but his armor isn't just gray. There's blues in it, there's greens in it, there's browns in it. I feel like the artist who painted this really, really knew how to do some work with their paints. And no metallics in this. It's all non-metallic metals, and it looks super, super lovely. Yeah, good old Leviathanrus. Number 7, the Imperial Fist's Adorn. In my opinion, the best Primarch. I absolutely love this miniature. I think it is absolutely lovely. I love his practical chainsword. I love his practical bolter. And the pose, this is what I'm talking about. I'm so glad that this was the next one, because as much as I complained about a Primarch doing a little jog, this is what I like about a Primarch. I mean, he feels like a statue. What I imagine is he just cut through an entire room full of pleb Space Marines like nothing, and then he's planted his sword down and his cloak is blowing in the wind. There's probably, some doves flying by like a John Woo movie, and he's just looking at his enemy and they're all stunned into silence, and he's just like, I remain. This feels super badass and heroic and awesome to me. More so than just an in the moment throwing a sword chop. I love this miniature. And once again, one of the better painted Primarchs. Absolutely lovely, lovely non-metallic metal paint job on this. I think the base is one of my favorites, where it's simple. The Space Marine is sinking into the ground, like I suggested earlier, and the lines of the ground kind of bring your eye to him. I think some of the other bases where it's chunks of rock and chunks of building are a little bit more mishmash. This is just a nice pyramid that your eyes land on the base, and then they're drawn straight up to Dorn, standing heroically in the middle, framed by his bright crimson red cloak. It's so nice, so well done. Absolutely love this miniature. And I do like the face, but I feel like maybe just a little bit of stubble, just a little painted on stubble would add something nice. Just a little. I know he's Dorn, he's like the ultimate siege master, and he probably would never allow stubble. Although maybe a nice mustache would be very nice. But I think if I had this miniature, I don't know, maybe. I don't know, they're pretty expensive though, maybe not. I would put on just a little bit of stubble. I think that would really, it would put a little extra cherry on top of a beautiful ice cream sundae. Super, super nice. Next up, number 8, the Night Lord's Conrad Curse. And this one's fine, but I don't love it that much. I like Conrad. I've watched some lore videos and read some wikis on him, and he's got some pretty cool. He's basically like mega evil Batman, and I like him. I think he's really cool. I like that his armor, even though it is Terminator plate, it has been molded better to his body, where they kind of said, well, we screw the normal Buzz Lightyear proportions. Let's make things a little bit more fitted. Let's make them a little bit more robotic. I really like it. I like his armor. I like that it's kind of all beat up and crazy. I like that he has bits of flesh and bone strapped to him. I don't like his base though. I don't really like his base much at all. It feels a little amateurish, and it's not like I could do better, but it feels a little like there's pipes that are just broken on the end, and pipes don't break, they fold. It looks like they got the fold right maybe on the bottom half, but on the top half where his foot is standing, it's like the pipe just broke off like it was made of clay, which it probably was made of. I don't know. The base is kind of whatever. He also is wearing Terminator plate, but they put him up on a building like he's really lithe and cat-like, and he's like skittering around, which I don't know how well that works if you're in Terminator war plate. Maybe if he had a hand on something too, because your arm strength, I could believe that his Terminator armor would let him, Spider-Man up a wall, more so than just perched a little bit high. I don't know. I don't super love his base and this whole vibe, but I like him. I think he's cool. I like that his fingers terminate in claws. I like that he has the Predator Arnold Schwarzenegger monster double wrist gauntlets, death blades that are horrifyingly sickle looking. But yeah, I just don't feel like the base is really getting across his whole thing. It's like, how did this end up happening? How did a whole building crumbles, and so he decides to just get a little taller by crawling up to the top? It's all right. But I like it. I like it in general. I don't think there's any of these I don't like. I think they're all good. Number 9, the Blood Angels Sanguinius. This one I might not like. It's a very specific pose, and it might just be that this pose is not jiving with me. Once again, I said that my favorite Primarch was Dorn, just standing. So you all know I like boring things, and I feel like this is maybe too. It's just a moment. Him dropping down like an eagle about to stab something that we can't see because it's not sculpted into the diorama. It would have been so cool if maybe they had like a Titan head looking up or a monster head looking up. Then I feel like it would complete the picture. Right now, he's just stabbing down into something I have to imagine, and it's whatever. But I love his armor. I really think it looks nice. It's very Custodes. I like that it's very fitted. I love his sword. It kind of feels like a fencing saber. It's got a really fun, ornate guard over it that you don't see. Once again, they're taking the aesthetics of medieval, but they're also bringing in other time periods and other cultural artifacts and stylings. I really like that. The wings feel very angel statue from a graveyard. They don't feel that special to me. I feel like I've seen those wings on cheap angel toppers from Christmas trees. That's not nice, but it's kind of, they don't feel very good. They look chunky, they look solid, they look heavy. They don't, and I think maybe they should be like twice as wide. I know you don't want to make it an absolute enormous monstrosity of a thing, but when you look at an eagle, the eagle's this big. An eagle is like 8 inches from, his nose to his claws, and then his wingspan is like 10 feet. You need a lot of wing to make it look like something can fly, and I feel like there's just not a lot of wing going on with this guy. It also looks a little bit like the rock that's helping him stay up is attached to his butt, which is not helping him look angelic and heroic. I probably would have had it attached to maybe his foot, or maybe have it attached to the wing, as opposed to his butt. But I don't know, those wings I think are really knocking a lot of points off for me for a model that is otherwise pretty exceptional. But I think maybe just something a little bit, you know, like Saint Celestine, she's rising up and it looks, her face is up and you can see it, as opposed to him where he's really just looking down at like some gum stuck to his foot. I don't know, I don't love it, I really don't. But that's fine because it's just my opinion, so I don't like him. Also, his head's way too tall. It looks, that's just a general complaint for most of these, but their heads are too tall. Moving on to number 10, Iron Hands Ferris Manus. And this guy, a lot like Portarabo, I'm really digging how the armor, I think, tells the story of him. And this guy, I feel like I don't know anything about him. I mean, I know he's probably Iron Hands, so like the Iron Hand Space Marines. The flesh is weak, isn't that their catchphrase? He looks a little like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which I'm really digging. But I like him. I like that his pose I don't mind because it's a little bit simpler than some of the other ones. He's just swinging his sword, but it's not like a wiffle bat swing. It looks like he is taking a hammer and he's going to hit the side of something. And it also does a good job of allowing for a pose where he is standing and you can see his chest armor, you can see his leg armor, you can see his arms. There's nothing hidden because of the pose. It's very open. And I really like that. I like the neat detail that his hands are made of metal. Like he's got these massive arms and then they just transform into metal. Where have I seen that before? Is there an X-Men who can turn into metal? I don't know. I know Cable, but he's all metal. He doesn't get to pick. So I think that's a neat little detail though. And he's also got like workshop arms on his back that have saws and clippers and cutting machines, and so it looks like he must be good at tinkering or building stuff. I really dig that about his armor. He's got a really cool thing going on his leg armor, where it's two halves of a gear interlocking, and it's a really nice little detail. I like that. He must be the fixer. If this was a movie, he would be the guy who keeps all of the gear and the spaceships running. And it basically is a movie, isn't it? I really dig it. The base is fine. It's a lot of general rocks and dead Space Marine bodies, but I feel like it works well enough. And at least it is keeping in his styling, because he's pretty ornate. And there's details, there's like every square centimeter of him has like 2 details, and so I feel like every centimeter of the base also has 2 details. So it doesn't feel visually cluttered because it's all pretty even. But I like him. I don't know if he's one of my all-time faves, but there's certainly nothing about him that I find objectionable. I think he's neat. I think he's very cool, and I like all of his little chains. I think just chains look good. Number 11, Unknown. And the reason that this Primarch is actually unknown is because it's actually our Patreon. If you guys like the videos we make and you want to see more, the best way to support us is by becoming a member of our Patreon. Over there, you're gonna get access to some behind the scenes, voting on what models I paint live on YouTube, a live hobby hangout every week, terrain STLs, and more. With that said, let's get back to looking at the Primarchs. Number 12, the World Eaters Angron. I believe this was the first Primarch released, and I definitely think it shows its age a little bit, but I think it's really good. His shoulders are real big, which is like a classic character design thing. If you want something to look strong and aggressive, you give it really big shoulders, and I think it really works. He definitely has a very action pose, but it's the action pose, you know, unlike Lionel Johnson's wiffle bat arms, I feel like it's keeping him open. You can see his chest, you can see his shoulders, you can see both arms and both weapons. You can see the nice detail on his knee pointed directly forward. I really like that his knee has fangs, and then if you just look up a little further, his mouth is bared in fangs. And then if you look up just a little bit further, he's got a little head crest that's got fangs on it. It's just kind of a fun motif that they kept. It helps you keep moving upwards looking at the figure, and I really dig it. He looks strong, he looks aggressive. I'm not sure how I feel about like the Space Marines exploding away from him. I think maybe if you use some of that goo stuff that people use to make like strands of gore, of viscous blood, maybe if you had strands leading to his axes, that would be really, really cool and help sell that he's just finished off these two guys and he's moving on to the next ones. But I really dig it. I also like that his weapons are chained to his hands. That seems very appropriate for a guy who looks this berserk. Moving on to number 13, the Ultramarines Reboote Gilliman. I feel like this guy has everything that I said was great about Dorn, but I kind of don't like it about him. I like that he's just proudly standing and presenting his very short sword to the world. I think the big problem for me is his armor. It looks exactly like 40k armor. They didn't do any sculpting it to his body. He has like fake armor pecs and a fake armor six pack, where I feel like the other ones, they're more shapely in the chest, where he's kind of a barrel. If you told me that this was Cato Sicarius, I would think, yeah, that's probably Cato Sicarius. It doesn't feel like a really impressive, strong Primarch. It just kind of feels like whatever. Power fists are a tricky thing because they're super dumb. Power fists are literally like mega power gloves that are the entire size of your torso and would be questionably efficient. I mean, you can only punch as hard as you can punch. I know that there's, magic in there that makes it like a mega punch, like a video game punch. And I suppose if you got a good hand on something, you would always be able to crush it. It makes perfect sense for the orcs, and it makes sense for Space Marines. I like it on Space Marines, but again, 40k has a very different feel to the 30k Primarchs. I feel like maybe a power fist should have just been a little bit of an extra sized hand, as opposed to a quadruple the size of a hand power fist. I don't know. I think his power armor is really kind of what kills it for me. If it was a little bit more shapely and sculpted, I feel like it would do a lot more for me. But currently it just looks like any other Marneus Calgar Space Marine armor. His base is really, really cool though. I wish more of them had bases this good. I feel like that is the appropriate base for an Ultramarine. Just a lovely chunk out of the whatever homeworld of the Ultramarines there is. Moving on to number 14, the Death Guard Mortarian. This guy is super dope. Clearly, he's already got a touch of the Nurgle going on, a little touch of the Plague, but I really, really like it. I also feel like his armor is more plain than the others, and I really think that helps a lot because it gives you kind of two options. It gives you the option of going a lot cleaner or even doing some really interesting subtle freehanding on his armor, or it lets you do what has been done here where you weather the heck out of him. And it would be really a big pain in the butt to weather the heck out of him if he was super ornate. I mean, are you gonna put a little bit of streaking grime like in between a skull and a leaf and a laurel and a little bit of trim? But having him be kind of so much more plain, also a lot of cloth, which is really nice because cloth is another thing that's really easy to weather. But I think it was a top-notch decision to have him be a lot plainer. It also gives him a little bit more of a separate feeling than his other brothers, who are mostly, for the most part, completely ornate, whereas this guy is not. I really, really dig it. And I like his sickle. It's a very nice sci-fi Grim Reaper sickle. I like that the last 5 inches of the sickle is a chainsaw, just because why not? It's just fun. And it's just a little icing on top. I really, really like him. I also think that his head poking out of the hole in his Terminator armor, and then he just got a little hood, just gives him a little nice something, like he wants to hide his face, his diseased face probably. I really, really like it. I think he's neat. His base is kind of plain and simple, but I think it works. The pipes, you know what takes corrosion really, really well? Good old-fashioned pipe. I think that would be another really, really nice way to add a little bit more Nurgle into the base. Otherwise, just a chunk of ground, but it's a perfectly good chunk of ground. I like this guy. I think the decisions made in his design really help tell the story of maybe a good guy turned bad, nice armor turned gross, backpack turned pipey, sickle turned disease. I really like it. Moving on to number 15 with the 1,000 Suns and Magnus the Red. Finally, another Primarch I know about, and this guy is, I almost feel like he's a way better done than the other Primarchs. He looks amazing. Clearly they got somebody who really, I mean, compare this guy to Gilliman, Rowboat Girly Man. I mean, he looks like you'd sculpted a perfect Greek statue and then you hung armor off the statue. Everything is in proportion, everything has a good posing. Once again, very open, one arm pointing out casting a magic spell, the other arm pointed backwards, a little bit of tilt to the body to really present his chest, really show off his legs, really show off his waist. It's a really nice pose. The base is wonderful. I love the magical warp flame coming up around the body, which just kind of, it's nice and parallel to the posing of his arms, which is just, it's another one of those things that tickles you when it tickles your brain, because you don't necessarily notice it, but your brain does. When you see things that mirror each other and then it complements. So the base arcing up in a line and then his arms arcing up in a line, it just feels nice. It feels like it should be. It was made with a clear decision in mind. It's not haphazard. I really like this model. And it's painted leagues better than some of the other Primarchs. It looks so lovely with some beautiful non-metallic metal, some object source lighting on the hand, his lovely long flowing red Goldilocks hanging in the background. Everything is top notch. I like that he's got bare arms coming out, like he's just so powerful that he doesn't even need the robot power on his arms. It's super cool. This guy, he's gotta be the best, probably. I mean, he's so neat. And he's got red skin. That's just fun. He's weird. He's like Clifford the Big Red Primarch. Really love this model. Top notch. Number 16, the Sons of Horus. Horus! This guy is classic. I think this is kind of the model that really kind of sells the whole Primarch line. I feel like he's probably the top seller, right? Because the Horus heresy, he's Horus. Everybody needs Horus. And he looks really cool. And so I just want to get the criticisms out of the way first. His head is 20% too big and 20% too tall and looks pretty ridiculous, but I'm sure there's head swaps available, or you just try to diminish it a little bit with the painting so that it's not so just Mr. Clean's big bald head sticking out of the Terminator armor. I feel like the Power Fist kind of works with him because he's just so big. Like his thing is he's clearly big. And so I feel like a giant Power Fist kind of makes sense. He also looks very brutal. He's got his big staff, or his big mace with the big ball on the end, and then it's kind of balanced out by his giant meaty fist, and then he's got the big dog pelt on top covering up his big cataphracti Terminator shoulders. I think this really looks good. And once again, you've got really a well sculpted look, because the eagle that he's standing on is pointed up. And then you've got his body proportions and his staff pointing up. And then you've got a nice line with the railing that's pointed up. It all follows a similar direction, and it feels like there's energy moving in one direction, and it looks absolutely lovely. It feels very balanced and very thoughtful in how it was sculpted. I think it's really nice. Yeah, his head is way too big. I also think that he's decorated, but he's not overly decorated. I mean, they're all overly decorated. That's the baseline. But in terms of how I feel about his decorations, they're not like punching my eyes in the face, because I feel like every single plate of armor he has on him has probably 50% decoration and 50% plain flat armor, which I think really makes it looks like he's, the most important guy around, but he's not just wearing, gold decoration. He's wearing something efficient and useful, utilitarian. But I really dig it. Horus, they knocked it out of the ballpark with him, as they should, because he's Horus. You need to. Number 17, the World Bearer's Loregar. The only thing I know about Loregar is #blame Loregar. And he feels very separate from the others, but I like that about him. He's got real old man get off my lawn vibes, and I really appreciate that. He's very simple. He's not wearing Terminator armor, he's just wearing regular old power armor that's very slender and very fitted. I like his pose, just standing, surveying the battlefield. You know, thinking about where he's gonna go after dinner. Thinking about his nap, his mid-afternoon nap, because he's an old man. I really like it. It's very simple. His base, he's in some kind of a temple with some flaming skulls and some hieroglyphs on the ground. He also has very similar hieroglyphs that seem to be kind of haphazardly scratched into his armor, which makes me think that he might be a little bit more like religious, or he kind of believes in mythology more than the others. And I like him. He's very simple, but I think that simplicity helps tell his story really well. I like this miniature. And he's not overly flashy, and that sickle or that mace really looks like it can do some damage. But other than that, he's just a nice looking fella in simple utilitarian armor that is probably bad news for anybody who tries to get in his way. I like it. 18, Salamander's Vulcan. This guy is wearing classic Space Marine armor, but I think it works because he's Vulcan. He's just a nice friendly fella who's gonna hit something with that hammer. And he should feel pretty chunky. I think his pose makes sense, but once again, similarly to the Lionel Johnson, I think he would be better if he was a little bit more centered on his base, because right now he's a little bit offset so that he can be swinging at a pile of dead Space Marines, and there's nothing for him to hit with his hammer. Like he's doing the classic, Thor, chalking up so that he can bring the hammer down on nothing. All the Space Marines on his base are dead. And I don't think that there should be more Space Marines like standing ready to be hit, because now all of a sudden you have more figures that are taking up more room on the base, and really they should all just be the Primarchs, showing off the Primarchs. But once again, you can unplug him from his diorama and then he's perfect essentially. But I like him. His armor is nice, classic Marine armor. I like that he's got his little flamethrower gauntlets. I like that he's got the salamander skull on his shoulder. I think his head actually looks fairly in proportion. Often you can see a little bit too much chin and throat for somebody who's essentially got like the Buzz Lightyear socket. But I think he looks really nice. His hammer also is appropriate. I'm not a big hammer person. I think hammer weapons are dumb. But he's Vulcan. I feel like he kind of sells the hammer. And I think that's another reason why I don't mind his big chunky armor, is because he's got a big chunky weapon. And I think if he was kind of a little bit more slender, Singuinius looking armor with a hammer, I'd be like, he's not using that hammer. But I like him. I think he's great. Number 19, the Raven Guard's Corvus Corax. And this guy I feel very mixed on. I think he's pretty badass. But he, again, very 40k vibes. I don't get very 30k vibes. If he was wearing maybe more Sanguinius style armor with his really cool wings, it would help more. I don't know. I think another thing is it's a very action pose. He's landing on the ground, his wings are probably gonna do a downward flap to offset his bulk, and he's shooting a guy. I think I would have liked to see the laser or whatever bullets hitting to really sell what's going on, but yeah, it's also interesting that it's a gun, because if it's a gun, he didn't have to fly over here and shoot him. He could have just shot him from up in the air. It's an interesting decision. I also don't like that there's a big old Marine on the base, because it feels like they're kind of fighting for supremacy on what you're looking at. The Primarchs are so far beyond a normal Space Marine that I feel like the only place for a Space Marine is maybe dead on the ground, or maybe just not part of the diorama, because the Space Marines are very cartoony and the Primarchs are very nuts. But overall, he's all right. I think this is another one where it's just a casualty of black armor is hard to paint, because if you look at the greens on the base and on the Space Marine being shot, there's a really cool transition from kind of yellowy green to blue green to black, and it looks really lovely. And then on his armor, you just got black. Just flat black paint all over the place. Not looking too exciting. I think something that would have been really cool is maybe get a little bit of purple in there, because black is a hard color. I mean, you can't highlight black, because if you highlight black, it's gray. But I feel like maybe if you cheat a little bit and true black is purple, then you can get away with black existing on other parts of the armor and having it be properly shaded and highlighted. It's all right. And also, the face, he kind of looks like he's in one of those like wind tunnels where you float, because he's kind of squinting, probably because the whoosh of the wind and his hair is up. But unlike Singuinius' hair, where it kind of looks like a statuesque, Fabio style locks blowing in the wind, it really kind of feels like he just has long hair and went punk. It's all right. He's fine. I like his little Wolverine talons attached to his forearms. I really like his wings. His backpack the jet engines on it look a little small for how big and how much lift it would take to get his bony butt off the ground, but he's all right. I think the guys with wings are tricky. They're very tricky. And finally, number 20, the Alpha Legion's Alfarius Omegon. This guy, I don't know nothing about him, but he is cool. The decision to give him kind of a scale texture to his armor was top notch. It really does everything for the miniature. I really, really like it. He's got classic Space Marine proportions, but I feel like it works really well because he has his helmet on, and I really like that. I think if I know anything about Alfarius is that nobody knows who Alfarius is or what he looks like or something, and so maybe he always has the helmet on. But I dig it. I think he's got a really good look to him. His armor looks efficient, it looks functional, but it's very ornate, but not overly decorated, because a lot of that ornateness comes from the scaling of it, and I really, really think that looks neat. It looks like it was super fun to pick out every little scale, and it gives a nice glittery highlight effect. It's really, really, really nice. And it's simple and it's efficient. Again, his posing works really, really well to keep him open and presented to the viewer so that I can appreciate all the things about him. He's not covering up anything important. I can see his chest, I can see his legs, I can see his arms. I really, really like it. And it really sells that he uses a spear weapon, because why does he need a spear? Well, so he can stab plebs as they're trying to crawl away. I think it does a really, really good job of giving everything a reason. And even though his base is the good old-fashioned slate rock and dead Space Marine, I do like the story being told of a poor Space Marine trying his best to crawl away, and this guy just walks up, nope, you die. I think this guy is top-notch. Very, very well done. Even though I know nothing about this guy, I kind of want him. He just looks like a really fun miniature to paint. Those were all the Primarchs, and it was pretty cool to look at them. I can't imagine I'll ever buy any because damn, they're expensive. I think if you were to pick up the entire range, it'd be well over $2,000. But it was pretty cool. I think it's one of the more interesting things that makes Warhammer so unique, is you've got this 50-book series all about these characters, and you can purchase any one of them as a beautiful display miniature in resin. One complaint I have for all of these models, or at least the ones with naked heads, is that their necks are absurdly long. I get it, you want to see these guys' faces, but if you see too much, it gives them a giraffe neck, and you wonder where does that head connect to their shoulders. I think the clear winners from this list were Adorn and Magnus the Red, with Reboote, Gilliman, and Lionel Johnson being right down there at the bottom. But that was a fun list. I can't wait for them to reveal the last two unknown Primarchs. Perhaps the Emperor family will finally get some sisters. But please let me know in the comments below what were your favorite Primarchs, and let me know how wrong all of my opinions were. And now it's time for the real star of the show, this week's EOB Complete submissions. We put out a challenge to our community to send us before and after photos of their recently finished models to be immortalized in our videos. If you want to join in the fun, you can submit a before and after photo of your painted mini to our Discord server, which you can find in the description below, or you can post it to Instagram with the hashtag EOBComplete. Without further ado, let's look at and get inspired by what the folks have finished this week. A Hades breaching drill by Chief Surgeon, some Gaunt's Ghost by Duplicorn, a Space Marine Chapter Ancient by Beats Wild 3, some Middle-earth Blackguards by Zet Chamies, a Wolverine from Marvel Crisis Protocol by Chegs.jpg, some Necron Ophidian Destroyers by Juicy John, some Star Wars Legion models by Anim Nate, some Octeris Orc-Terrain by Black Lung Raider, a Halo Reach Spartan by Just Cruisin', a Sneaky Ariadna Chica by The Happy Heretic, some Assault Intercessors by Chief Son as a Grey Knight, an Intercessor Sergeant with Power Claw by Power Surge, some Thunderwolf Cavalry by Bulldog Legion, a Space Marine Lieutenant by Lucifer Hawk, a Tau Battlesuit by Yitagarasu Yig D, a squad of Space Marine Infiltrators by Friends of Grob, a Necron Plasmacite by Not Mike, an Emperor's Champion Chaos Lord by System A99, a Unicorn by Gina of Arc, a Space Marine Assault Intercessor by Ominous Mecha, an Ultramarines Judiciar by Khan Industries, a Sister of Battle Immolator by Pharaoh Von Sephiro, an Orc Commando Breacha by Mr. Ant, some Assault Intercessors by Caster, and a Chaos Glotkin by Gremlins Eat 2. Congratulations to everyone for a job well done. It's no small feat to get paint on minis, and you all should feel really proud. Nothing gets the hobby juices flowing like finishing a project, and we all thank you for sharing your work, motivating us and the hobby community to paint our plastic. Thanks for sharing.